Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan. Adam, hope you had a great weekend. I know we've been watching the NFL playoffs all weekend, and I got to tell you, something kind of stuck with me that I think stuck with a lot of Eagles fans in a lot of these games. Like you're seeing amazing catches. You saw the one by Jonnu Smith for the Titans for their first touchdown. DaVante Adams, Stefon Diggs, Marquise Brown. I think you watch these games and you see these unbelievable catches and you think, if only the Eagles had somebody making plays for them all year long the way these guys are in the playoffs. I mean, I think you and I can both agree as we kind of talk about for this podcast, we're going to do our offensive outlook and what the Eagles need to do this offseason and talk about the free agents and everything to be ready for 2020. This team needs its own version of a Sammy Watkins or a Diggs or an Adams. It needs a playmaker.
Yeah. Well, Watkins is Watkins. Geoff signed an enormous contract, great contract by the agent for the player, but an awful decision for the Chiefs when they signed him. That was just a bad contract.
He'd be the best player on the Eagles by far.
No, well, I don't know what that's saying, but I hear you. Yeah, look, Watkins is really gifted. He's just never lived up to the hype.
Yeah.
Now,
I love how I make a big picture comment. You want to needle in on the one guy who may not be as good as the rest.
But here, let me finish. You're right that they need a stud.
Right.
Sammy Watkins is so gifted. He's just had a major injury history, and he just never lived up to it. But you're right. He would be 50 times better than anyone that they have. That's what they need. What Geoff's saying is, could you get someone who can make a play for the quarterback? I get it. You're absolutely right.
It's just crazy, and I'm sure there's a lot of envy going on as Eagles fans watch the playoffs, and we'll see what happens next week. But that's a great segue. That's the theme of our kind of first official off-season podcast for ITB this year. We're going to take a look at the offensive roster. We're going to go through some changes that we think should be made, maybe some guys we think that should go or stay, anything we're hearing, and kind of what we can expect from the Eagles offensively as they go into the offseason. So as we would normally do, Adam, we start at quarterback, but this is probably the first time in the offseason where, hey, it's Carson Wentz. He played 16 games. Yes, he did get hurt with a concussion in the playoffs, but he's the guy that's here to stay. He's got the long-term contract. The backup quarterback position has been really prioritized for this team since Doug Peterson got here. And now you've got Josh McCown, who's going to be a free agent, Nate Sudfeld, who's going to be a free agent, and Kyle Lauletta from the practice squad. How do you see this situation?
You're right, man. It's really interesting. So they had done such a great job of developing Sudfeld to a certain extent, and then the last year he's just dropped off. I would say training camp, Geoff, just being there and talking to people, he needed to settle down, needed to just let everything slow down for him like he had done previously the year before, and it didn't slow down for him. Then he broke his wrist. And he just got too far behind, and the Eagles, they actually talked to Josh McCown's agent in the spring, I think in March, just to see what Josh was doing. And then Josh was going to television, so they put that on hold. And then as soon as Nate got hurt, they got the deal done and bring him back. And you and I talked about how great of an influence he was on the locker room, and obviously Nate and Carson, and really the whole quarterback room. Just an amazing guy. And now, by the way, he's 40. Josh hasn't decided what he wants to do. But you're right; these guys are free agents, and right now they don't have a number 2 or number 3 quarterback. Now, yes, they only dress 2 quarterbacks almost always, but they kind of have to know who the guy's going to be for next season.
Right.
If you would have asked me before the season started, I would have said, Nate Sudfeld's their future backup. I'm not 100% sure on that right now. I know we're nearing mid-January, so it's very early for free agency.
Mm-hmm.
But Nate just dropped off, to sum this up, and they're going to have to make a tough decision here. Now, it's not like we're 2 months away from free agency, so we'll do a free agency show later. But it's hard to develop quarterbacks that are your own, Geoff. You're right. I mean, it's really been hard. But Nate, to me, I still think they have to stick by him. And yes, we've outlined Press Taylor. He's got to do a better job. But Nate Sudfeld's got a lot of ability. He's been there too long, 3 years. Geoff, remember now, they brought him in 2017. I mean, they've invested 3 years in this guy. Why walk away?
No, I agree with you. Here's what I wonder. We know that Nate Sudfeld turned down a contract extension at some point during the season. Well, he was on a 1-year deal. He took the restricted free agent tender because he wanted, thinking he was going to be the backup and maybe even get some time. It's like an audition to go into this offseason and maybe find a job somewhere else. He didn't get that opportunity. So he's kind of in a rock and a hard place here. I guess you have to wonder if there's another team that has liked him at all for the past year and a half and is going to be willing to make him or at least pay him to be their backup going into camp. And it's enticing enough for him to want to go and the Eagles not to match.
It's interesting. A year ago, I'm told they actually offered him a extension, and he declined.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was betting on himself, which I totally understand because things are better a year ago for him, and unfortunately, it didn't happen for him. And it's just so hard to find guys like him, high character, arm strength, good, decent mobility. He's not a great athlete, but decent enough. And who's young enough. So I would be very surprised if they walked away, man. Now, here I will tell you, they've had interest in Case Keenum in the past.
Mm-hmm.
His contract's up. That's a guy. I know this is, again, very early. We'll when we get to our free agency show next month, I'll have more intel on this. But that's a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I wonder also about a guy like Colt McCoy, who will be, I believe, a free agent and has experience in the West Coast offense.
Right.
And has played
right.
it, when not hurt, played well. Yeah, no, that's right. Case and Colt. It's actually a really nice quarterback free agent class. I mean, there's some weird anomalies with Brady and Breeze, and we'll find out.
Oh, God, yeah.
I know. I'm sure Eli. I mean, you've already heard Eli say he doesn't want to be a backup. But as far as people who know this system, I mean, Marcus Mariota will be most likely a free agent. So you got Chase Daniel. You mentioned Keenum, McCoy. We talked about Sudfeld, McCarron, Ryan Tannehill. Might be looking for a big contract if he doesn't come back with.
He'll be back with Tennessee though. They'll franchise.
I think so too. Trevor Siemian is another guy, so it's not exactly a Blaine Gabbert. It's not a terrible Matt Moore. Not an awful market for backup quarterbacks at all. Let's move on to running back. I think Miles Sanders goes into 2020. I would have to think as the guy that they want to just continue to feature as their 3-down back.
100%. Yeah.
Now, I think what's interesting is we'll find out though how much Doug Peterson plans to use a guy as a 3-down back. This was his rookie year, so even though he was excelling at the end of the year, they still were able to get Boston Scott a lot of carries. I'm kind of wondering what kind of role or touches, I should say, that Doug has in mind for Miles in 2020. But nevertheless, the backup situation is very important.
Yeah, let me address this. We talked about this probably, a long time ago. Those of you listen to us who've been with us since the beginning, we talked about how coaches really never go in and think, okay, you know what, we're just going to have a committee. Like that's not the way that they think. What they try to do is they don't typically want the starting running back to wear down, so they'll roll in another back. And you're right, Boston Scott they discovered him out of necessity after Jordan Howard got hurt. Now, here's my question to you, Geoff. What do you do about Jordan Howard?
Well, that's a great question. We know that it seemed like their intent was to acquire him, use him 45-55% of the time on carries, hope he has a good year, and let him walk off into offseason, score a pretty decent contract, and then that would help them get some juice for a compensatory pick. And the injury, the season, I don't know how attractive he's looking for anything more than a 1-year deal, I guess, in free agency. So if it's going to be a 1-year deal, he's been here. I can see the Eagles trying to bring him back for a year.
Here's my question to you. Let me ask you this question. Let me ask you a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
You and I totally agree that Miles Sanders must be the guy. There's no debate. There's no argument. There's really no discussion over it. He's the guy. He's special. You were calling for it for 2 months. He got off to a little bit of a slow start in that Atlanta game. They probably rushed him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Once he started to know what he was doing, and Deuce Staley's such a great running backs coach, he looked elite. I mean, he is what you want in today's running back. He could do everything: run, catch, improve blocking. He's not quite there yet, but he really improved. Hard worker, intelligent, cares, competitive.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't mind having, because it really worked, Geoff, before Jordan Howard got hurt. Boy, did he look good in that role.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if Jordan Howard is willing to accept a reduced role, 5 to 8 carries a game, I'm good. If he's not, he can walk. Now they're going to have. Now here's my another question for you. Corey Clement is a restricted free agent. My sense is that they will use. I don't know it this yet because I haven't decided. But the smart thing would be for them to be tender at the low level, the lowest level,
mm-hmm.
and all they could do is they have right of first refusal. They wouldn't get anything back if they decline it. But he's valuable in special teams, jack of all trades. I know that he's been hurt the past 2 seasons, but the guy's talented, and it's not going to cost him much. A low tenor is really not a lot of money.
Right. I mean, you want to go into camp next year with at least 5 or 6 backs, right? Sanders locked in. Boston Scott should get a chance. I agree with you. I think Corey Clement should get a chance at least because he's very cost efficient on an RFA deal to come back. So that would be 3 right there. And I would, consider bringing Jordan Howard back on a 1-year deal. That gives you 4. You already have Holyfield 5. Maybe draft a guy late. But yeah, I think at this point, I don't think that Jordan Howard's going to get a great deal from another team in the offseason who's going to give him 15, 20, 25 carries a game. If someone's there and he does it, all right, maybe good. Maybe Carolina. Maybe Matt Rule wants to start over and ground and pound a little bit before he gets his guys going. I don't know. But if it's not there, then I would try to bring him back. And I think Jordan would have to understand that he's second fiddle now to Miles Sanders. And really, I think you got to give Boston Scott a really fair chance to at least be number 2, but maybe compete with Corey for the number 3.
Yeah, I think it's right now. I would say it's Sanders 1. Scott's under contract for 2020. It's Scott. It's 2. If Howard's back, he's 2, and Scott's 3. But Scott, you're going to use as a change up, someone third down,
right?
And that's it. I mean, now and Clement, of course, should you bring him in as the 4th, who could compete for the 3rd job. He's a jack of all trades. You could use him in a variety of ways. And you're right. I think you make a great point. Why not have 5 or 6 backs with all the injuries they've had, for goodness sake? And then, Holyfield is signed, for next season. So you bring him in. Doug Peterson talked about how he was actually at his workout. I'm told that, Geoff, the reason why he didn't get drafted, his pro day workout was so slow. He might have, I don't have it in front of me, but a scout told me that it might have been like 4.8 or something. It was just so slow you couldn't draft him.
Wow, he had a very productive career though at Georgia.
Yeah, they it's very clear. They really liked him. So I think they'll be okay at running back, and obviously Miles looks like he's gonna be really special.
Yeah, really quick though before we move on from it, because I guess if Jordan Howard goes, somebody else gives him a better deal, and you wind up bringing back as your 3 top running backs in some form or fashion, Miles, Boston Scott, and Corey Clement. Do you think you still need to sign kind of a bigger veteran, like a goal line guy, a 3rd and 4th and 1 guy?
You mean if Howard's gone?
If Howard's gone, yeah.
Okay, I would think if Clement's back, he could get some of that. I don't know that you need a designated short yardage guy. I think Sanders could do some of it. Clement could do some of it.
Yeah.
I think I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think that you got to be careful about what you promise this player. Because Jordan Howard, if he comes back, as I said earlier, he's got to be told, look, this is the role you're going to have. You're going to back up Miles. We're looking at 5 to 8 carries a game. You're not going to catch the football. That's really not what you do. Yeah, he did the Green Bay game, but it's rare that basically you don't design anything for him in the pass game. Look, I'd love to have him if he's willing to come back for a 1-year deal for $3 million. Hey, come back, man. We'd love to have you. But other than that, I just don't see it.
Wouldn't shock me at all if the Eagles let him walk regardless, and then if they did feel like they need that kind of bigger veteran, just sign one in the offseason to some non-guaranteed money and see if he can make the team. That would be my approach.
By the way, remember what we were talking about with Tim Jernigan when everyone said he wouldn't be coming back, and I said, no, that's not true. I'm told that they maintained communication with Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, and they brought him back. So it's not. Jordan Howard's a great guy. They've done deals with Jordan Howard's agent in the past, so it's not a big deal. So that's the running back position, and I don't know we're going to spend this much time on it, but it's very important.
Yeah.
That with all the injuries, and remember, Darren Sproles retired, Clement got hurt, Howard got hurt. There's been a lot going on with this position.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to pass catchers.
Yep.
First, we'll pause real quick for a word from our sponsors.
Hey, it's Geoff Mosher. Adam Caplan and I love using Anchor for our Inside the Birds podcast every week. It's so user-friendly, anyone can create their own podcast, and you should too. Just download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor gives you everything you need to start your own podcast from your phone or computer. Its creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast for a professional sound and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and so many other platforms. It can be heard by everyone, just like Inside the Birds. You can also make money from your pod with no minimum listenership. What are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to create your podcast today. Hey, it's Geoff Mosher. Are you interested in money? Yep, I thought so. Well, on the Talk Money with Mesh Lakhani podcast, Mesh will follow paper trails, chat with experts, and break down complex ideas to bring clarity to the mystical financial phenomena and help listeners uncover the story behind their money. Each of these compelling stories will hit a broad range of subjects ranging from buying Bitcoin, dealing with student debt, and everything in between. So if you're interested in money, and I know you are, check out the Talk Money with Mesh Lakhani podcast on Anchor. If you're listening to this, you obviously like podcasts, and you probably like music too. On Spotify, you can listen to all of that in one place for free. That's right, you don't need a premium account. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcast so you never miss an episode. You can download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are. You can easily share what you're listening to with your friends via Spotify's integrations with social media platforms like Instagram. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now. Just search for Inside the Birds on the Spotify app or browse podcasts in the Your Library tab. And follow me, Geoff Mosher, so you never miss an episode of Inside the Birds. Spotify is the world's leading music streaming service, and now it can be your go-to for podcasts too.
I want to address, I know you'd think we'd start with Deshaun or Alshon or Nelson, but I really actually want to start with tight ends because we got a lot of questions asked to us on #AskITB, and I think we can just kind of answer it and address it right now. There is concern or there's questions. People are wondering if the Eagles are going to trade Zach Ertz because of what they've gotten Goedert so far. And I can't look into a crystal ball. Can only give our best insider and our best analysis. I don't see that happening this year. I think there's an advantage to having Dallas Goedert on a rookie deal. There's an advantage to having Zach Ertz because he's just in general a better tight end overall. And Doug loves, at least he has lately, to run his 12 personnel. It's maybe a discussion when it's time to pay Goedert, but for right now, you got to like what you see, and I got to think both of these guys are back.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The latter part you said about it's maybe a discussion down the line in a couple years from now when it's time to pay Goedert. Mm-hmm. You got to see Zach will be over 30 then. You got to see where he's at physically. You got to see how Goedert hangs in there. He ended the season very well. Their goal, I'm told, this season was to make it before Goedert. Well, I could say before he hurt his calf. Unfortunately, he hurt it at the start of training camp.
Right.
Had he not gotten hurt, I'm pretty certain their offense would have been 12 personnel with it, not just using two tight ends, but both guys being dominant. But Dallas was not himself until the second half, unfortunately. But they've never had any plans trading him. I think what happened is people got excited to see how Goedert dominated with his ability to post up, the defender. He's very gifted, and by the way, he's a tremendous blocker. One guy who graded the tape for me said he was dominant. It might have been the first playoff game. He was really, really good. Mm-hmm. Also did well against Dallas late in the season. So that's pretty much the tight end position. And then the third guy, Richard Rodgers, is up. He's had a big injury history, but they like him. Perkins is under contract. I believe, yes, he is through 2020. Mm-hmm. They want to bring him back. He's not much of a blocker, but those are the two guys.
Yeah. Who's the kid who got hurt? Ellis.
Yeah. Well, they brought him back. He's actually he's signed a reserve future contract, so they'll have him on the offseason roster.
Yeah, but this is obviously mainly a Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert position primarily. Yep. Maybe it's something they look at later in the draft, just if they decide Perkins and Ellis are not for them, but they still want to be heavy 12 personnel. Wouldn't surprise me. They're going to have a lot of picks. Howie expects about 10, so we'll look for that. And again,
yes, but yes.
I know what he expects is not what he always gets, though.
Exactly. and remember what we said at the trade deadline when he didn't make the trade for Jalen Ramsey.
Right.
We're going to hold him to that. If you're not going to trade picks, you better use them. That's right. He was on record. He was pretty strong, and I'm going to trust his word here. And it's his press conference last week. that they really want to get younger. And he talked about the 2-year window. Well, you know what? It's real simple. You're going to use them on receivers, okay, on offense. What do they need? They need receivers in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing an offensive podcast here. The defense will be the next one. So what do they got to do? Receiver, speed, and size. They got to get guys who can go get it.
Yeah, I think what we saw, and well, before we get into that, from a pass catcher standpoint, let's talk about the 3 elephants in the room: Alshon, Deshaun, and Nelson. Any disagreement here that Nelson's not going to be back? I mean, do we even have to talk about Nelson?
All right. There's no way. It would be the biggest upset in the last year if he came back. No, it's not something that you and I have to check on. We know he's not coming back. So
yeah,
I
look forward to him catching 80 balls for the Patriots next year and having a breakout year, because you know that's going to happen.
Look, I don't know what happened to him. He was so good 2 years ago during their Super Bowl run.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know. I know people want to say it was the coaching's part of it. Maybe not. But man, his regression was really the epitome of some of the players on this roster. They just did not improve.
That's right. Alshon Jeffrey's injury, which I believe we think is like the Jalen Mills, closer to the Mills one. It's going to keep him out almost a year, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I know people were quoting me. What I meant to say is, folks, as Geoff just said, he's got a similar injury to Jalen Mills. It's a 9 to 12 month recovery. Okay, he's going to start the preseason on active PUP. If he's not ready, if they don't think he'll be ready before the first half, he's going to be on reserve PUP to start the season, which means he misses the 6 weeks, and then they go from there. So let's put it this way, folks. Let's sum it up this way. If he comes back before mid-season, that's great. Good. It's good.
Yeah.
And the other things, people just want to cut the guy. I know he regressed this season before the injury. I get it. I don't have an answer for you. He suffered a very bad injury. It's unfortunate. They're stuck with his contract. Now, if they wanted to get rid of him, the problem is you cannot get rid of him until he passes a physical. And passing a physical, I know could be subjective, but they're going to treat Alshon the right way. The Eagles have a history of not doing anything bad to players, like really treating them the right way. They're going to do this the right way, whether they decide he can play this season for them or not. But if he's able to and come back before mid-season, I expect him to contribute. So we'll see what happens here.
Well, I mean, his recovery timetable throws a huge monkey wrench, I think, into this, because I really think the Eagles would have considered trying to trade him. Now, they wouldn't get much because he has such a big contract, but I feel like they would have tried to get rid of him in the offseason, maybe for a 5th round pick even. You see those kind of deals a lot in the offseason for guys just trying to get rid of, unload players with high contracts. But as you're mentioning, you can't do anything with him, putting him on the roster until he passes a physical. Now, if he doesn't pass a physical until sometime in late October or November, at that point, what do you do? I mean, you probably keep him on the team, although you might be leery of everything that just happened this past year about even having him on the team. So I don't know how they really reconcile.
Are you talking about the supposed, like, maybe some comments that were supposedly attributed to him, you mean? Are you talking about...
I mean, look, even if they don't think that they came from him, I just feel like what they got out of Alshon since they signed him is not what they paid.
Well, they did the restructure with him. Right. You could argue whether it was the smartest thing to do. It's not like they knew that he was going to get hurt,
right?
But he definitely regressed. But the way that I believe the Eagles will approach this season, anything they get out of him is a plus. They're not worrying about the future with him. It really, right now, you have one receiver that that is going to be a part of it somehow. Actually, 2. Deshaun Jackson, my understanding is their plan is to bring him back. They owe him $4.5 million, whether he's on the roster or not. If they decline his option, there's like a non-exercise fee of $2 million. Their plan, as I understand, is to bring him back.
Really? Okay. So, I wasn't sure about that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, my understanding is, it's $4.8 million is actually the actual number. There's offset language in the 4.8, I'm told. Just what I know, the intel that I have is more likely than not is probably the best way to put it. They want to see this through. Deshaun did everything he could to come back. Positive influence on the younger players. Certainly wasn't this way 5 years ago, but he's really, he's grown up. He's matured. So I'm expecting right now, ending of the offseason, Deshaun's on the roster. That's not going to stop them from drafting someone who could run.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me on that one.
Maybe Ward, even 2.
2, yes, thank you. Yes, I agree with you. Folks, don't worry about numbers. Numbers don't mean anything. People, when oh my God, they have too many receivers, folks. Did you see the win at the end of the season?
Yeah.
I used to get in Twitter debates with people. People say, "Oh, they have too many at that position." No, they don't. They can't have enough. And it's based on what we know. The reality is too many injuries. You can't have enough talent at that position. So right now, let's sum this up before we move on.
Yeah.
Deshaun will enter the offseason on the roster. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is 2. Greg Ward is 3. Alshon is an outlier. I don't even count him. And who else am I forgetting?
Greg Ward.
No, I put him on there.
Oh,
Ward,
Arcega-Whiteside. Well, that's Ward, and Deshaun.
That's it.
And Alshon is going to be injured. So, they really need to replenish. Let me ask you something. With them being so thin, and I'm personally more about draft and develop. I don't really love going out and spending money in free agency, especially at that position.
Speak the gospel, brother. Yes.
But there are a couple of names. Robbie Anderson will be a free agent. They've tried to target him in the past.
Yes.
Emmanuel Sanders is a great veteran and a great club. He's one of those guys that if you sign, you're not worried about how he acclimates into a clubhouse. However, you're going to have to pay some money for Emmanuel Sanders. And then, of course, A.J. Green, a lot of people have asked about.
Right. A.J. Green's older, 31 years old. Didn't even play this season.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing anything with older players. Sanders, I think, turns 33. Love the guy. One of my favorite players.
Mm-hmm.
Could play slot, could play outside. If he happened to be 3 years younger, I'd say absolutely. But I'm sure the Niners will want him back.
Yep.
He's got a great agent in Todd France. It's not going to be easy to get a deal. Only that he, in terms of Emmanuel's, what Emmanuel's going to want at 33. Really good player. One of the things I really admire about him, he plays through injury. He's shown the ability to do it. To me, they're going to add a minimum of 2 players in the draft at the receiver position. They need speed. They need size, playmakers. Everyone keeps telling me how great of a draft it is. Sure. Emmanuel turns 33 in March. I don't see it happen. I would think that the Niners will do all they can to bring him back. He's a great veteran to have. All they really have is him and Deebo Samuel. So Dante Pettis, by the way, has not worked out at all for them.
No, I don't think they'll wind up getting involved in the Robbie Anderson sweepstakes either, because eventually in this market, I feel like he'll get a really decent contract that the Eagles are just not going to be able to afford.
Yeah, and he's also had a pretty significant injury history. Good player, though. Deep threat, a little bit on the thinner side, but playmaker. So to sum it up, before we get out of here with receivers, I think that they'll add 2 receivers to the draft. They're going to have, I agree with your assessment. You and I are totally agreeing they're going to get 2 speed receivers. You got to get guys who can move the chains, get separation, and go get it. And right now they have a guy at 33, or guy turns 33 in Deshaun. They need to get younger, and I believe I'm gonna buy what Howie Roseman said. They're gonna get younger.
Right, and again, to put a cap on this, to reemphasize, draft guys, because you get them into their system, you get them into the locker room. You don't worry about them coming from other teams and burying the quarterback to the press. Draft and develop. All right, offensive line is going to round out this the offensive outlook, and the big question is there's 2. One's the big one and the obvious one, and that's what do you do with Jason Peters? He has said he does not want to retire. You can check out the whole video that we've got on our Inside the Birds YouTube channel. He talked about wanting to come back. He even talked about how excited he was for next year, but he's a free agent. And we just heard Howie say that he can't be as sentimental to his players going forward as he's been in the past. What do you make of that dichotomy?
Yeah, and look, I'm not – okay. I don't think his relationship with Jeffrey Lurie, we're talking about Jason Peters, should matter. I would be very surprised if it mattered. Jason obviously is going to be a Hall of Famer. One of the best transactions in Eagles history. Just really, they absolutely robbed the Bills, because the reason why they only had to give up what they gave up, Peters made it clear he wanted out. He was going to make it difficult if they didn't trade him. And it was just an incredible trade. I mean, look, it was in April of 2009, no doubt. Jason turns 38 very, very soon. Here's the way I look at it. If he's coming back, that's not good in their belief that Andre Dillard's ready. If he doesn't come back, that means they think Dillard's ready. I don't know what I just don't know what else to say.
Yeah, and I would hate for them to even make that decision by March on whether or not Dillard's ready, because that's just basically based on what you saw all last year, and it doesn't really factor in Dillard hitting the strength and conditioning and getting bigger and stronger in the offseason, because we know that that was his biggest issue. Remember, when he played poorest, it was when he was thrown in there at right tackle. He had some good moments at left tackle. I don't want to paint this picture that he was an abject disaster. His pass protection was good, decent. His run blocking needs to get a lot better, and just his overall play needs to get better and stronger. But it was really right tackle where he was an embarrassment, and that's not necessarily a fair judgment because he's not a right tackle.
Though his attitude, I know people complain about his attitude. Saying like what I don't know, he's like playing with left-handed or whatever he was talking about. Like he complained about it,
Right.
But the kid is so gifted. My God, Geoff. I know in OTAs I had heard that it wasn't happening for him yet. His hand placement wasn't good. And then in training camp, there were some days where you're like, oh my God, I've never seen anything more athletic. I had an offensive coordinator tell me he was the most athletic left tackle he's seen in 5 years.
Huh.
So the kid is gifted, needs to get stronger physically, needs to really accept that there's a next step for him. He hasn't arrived. So to me, Geoff, and they're going to have to decide this over the next month or so. They're actually starting the free agent meetings very, very soon. Before the season started, I didn't think there was a prayer in hell that Peters could come back. But now I'm like, I just believe it's going to be a discussion. They have to. It's either or. I can't imagine they would bring Peters back and then say, "Oh, here's the deal. Dillard's going to start, but Jason's willing to come in as a backup." That's not what he said. Like he wants to play, and the indication is Geoff. Right, he wants to play.
Yeah, and I know I kind of discussed this dream scenario where he comes back and he plays, 6 to 10 snaps a game in 13 personnel, and then probably sees a lot of snaps as a backup because they get injuries all the time. But it's nothing guaranteed, and he's getting older, so he wants to play. If it were up to me, Adam, I would move on. I really would. I think you got to get younger, and I think you got to bite the bullet and potentially get a little bit weaker at left tackle. But again, if you strengthen other areas and help your quarterback out in other areas, then you can possibly overcome it. But I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how many times you can just keep going back to the well on Jason Peters before all of a sudden he just falls right apart. And then you're just, oh man, we thought he was going to stay healthy and he doesn't. But obviously that'll be a decision made by them, and we'll see what they do. I think left guard is pretty set with Seumalo unless Jason Kelce were to retire, but we haven't heard any rumblings. Have you heard anything?
As of this weekend, there's no decision coming. So
okay,
I don't think it'll take too long. Jason, I believe, finished the season healthy.
Yeah,
I know that some of the reporters are saying like he wasn't as willing to talk as he used to be. I maybe some of the guys said that. Jason's a very thoughtful guy. He has a child now. To me, I've always said that it was a 2-year situation for him. This will be the second year after the new deal. If he sees it, if he decides to go forward, this will be his last year. Now the question would be, Seumalo, will he be his replacement or will they draft someone? That could come. Look, they've got 10 picks, Geoff. That could come in this draft.
Absolutely expect them to come out of a draft with at least one offensive lineman. It's kind of like the thing that they do. They like to draft quarterbacks when they can. They like to draft linemen when they can. So I would definitely anticipate them coming out with one. As you mentioned, Kelce, if he doesn't retire, stays at center. You got to think Brandon Brooks comes back okay at right guard. Lane Johnson, right tackle. The big question is Big V. He's a free agent. I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm not the biggest Big V fan in the world, but he's probably going to get a starting contract for some team somewhere in free agency.
I'm told they want him back. You just nailed it. He knows he's young. He's got versatility. This is what really helps the cross training that Stalin does with all these guys.
Yeah.
This actually helped Vitae's career because when he had to fill in for Peters during the Super Bowl run, like no one knew he could do that. I'm told the Niners really liked him. But what happened was the Niners, the two kids that filled in when Joe Staley got hurt and their Mike McGlinchey got hurt, they did such a good job.
Yeah.
That Skull was one of them. I can't remember the other kid that filled in. But anyway, so they backed off of even looking to acquire him.
Yep.
So, but you're right. I agree. I think Vaitai will be able to find a starting job at one position, one way or the other, somewhere else.
Offensive line play around the NFL is, as a couple of people have told me in personnel, at the worst that they can ever remember it. So someone even halfway decent like Big V will be courted by several teams, and that will drive a price up, and he'll sign somewhere. If he's back, it's great for the Eagles, good reserve, but I can't see it happening. So that, we were talking before, it kind of leaves, Matt Pryor, Nate Herbig, who was a rookie free agent. They kind of either need to sign a veteran for a year or draft a guy, and we'll see what they have to do. But they're definitely going to have to replenish if Big V leaves, because you can't have Herbig and Matt Pryor as your top backups.
I agree. Well, right. You need more experience. Yeah. I'll tell you what, Pryor was interesting. He had not really impressed until he actually had to play. It was to the point where most people in the league thought he was only a tackle, was too stiff to play inside, but a massive human being. He's just a big guy. And that Giant game was incredible. I mean, the one where he just moved defensive lineman like he just flattened him.
Right.
So that was really good to see. But he's got needs further development. It's never done for a young player. But I agree with what Geoff's saying. You got to go get a veteran, and you sign a guy 1 year, $2 million, just a journeyman guy. You need to get through until they figure it out. And I agree with your point that with all these picks, they're going to draft at least one lineman, if not two.
Yep.
And that's quite frankly, I mean, look, Geoff, they've got 7 defensive ends. Okay, they don't need 7.
Right.
So that's where they could go later. Maybe they only have 5 and go a little bit heavier on offensive line.
Yeah, we'll see what they do. I'm a proponent of treating offensive line backup like quarterback backup. You might even overpay a little bit to get a good backup in, because you know how important that it is. You mentioned defensive ends. That's a good segue, because we are going to talk about the entire defensive side of the football in our next podcast later this week. So that'll do it for our offensive outlook, and that will do it for Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. Want to thank our friends at 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're downloading their free mobile app at 97.3ESPN.com, listening to me, Mike Gill, Ryan Rothstein from 2 to 6 every day, and of course Shander and Mays from 12 to 2. Adam Caplan always joining us on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock. Thanks to our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. Check out all their great coverage of the Eagles, the Phillies, the Flyers, the Sixers, and some of their great podcasts, too. They're always enhancing the fan experience with their coverage. Thank our friend Hunter Brody, who helps produce the podcast. You got to check out his YouTube page, Sports Talk with Broads, where you'll see the most, and I mean the most, passionate fan takes in Philadelphia sports. And thanks always to former Eagles offensive lineman Todd Harrimans and his company Body Check Wellness for all their support. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, Inside the Birds, at Inside Birds, and make sure you're checking out our YouTube page for more video content, Inside the Birds on YouTube. Please become a subscriber. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the Birds.